Hello watchers. In this video, I will recap a film with the title Silent Night. This film is about a father's dedication for justice after his little son was shot and died in a gang-related shooting in his neighborhood. Alright, let's get straight to it. In a quiet and peaceful residential, there is a man named Brian who is playing with his only son when suddenly two cars belonging to some gang member appeared and involved in a shootout with each other. Unfortunately, one of the bullets hit Brian's son, causing his son to die instantly. Full of anger, Brian chases the cars to get revenge to the gang member. After he saw one car was overthrown, Brian tries to chase another car. Brian takes an iron bar from near the trash can and managed to hit the car windshield. Brian even managed to make that car stop and suffer severe damage by colliding it with a forklift. However, after that incident, a gangster named Gonzalez appeared from inside the car and shot Brian in the back. Instead of getting revenge for the death of his son, Brian has to accept the pain of truth when Gonzalez fired another shot right into his throat. After some time in hospital, Brian finally woke up from his coma. During the recovery period in the hospital, Brian underwent therapy to restore his ability to walk. However, Brian is now unable to speak due to the severe wound caused by the bullet in his throat. A few days later, Brian was finally allowed to go home.
And we're told that this is their main tool.
After they got home, Brian is still having a hard time accepting the death of his son. As the days went by, Brian only spends his time grieving in the garage. He no longer communicates with his wife. He's not even want face-to-face with her. This incident had quite a big impact, not only on his life but also on his household. Brian didn't care about his own life anymore. And because of that, his wife finally gave up. She decided to return to his parents' home after Brian no longer had the wish to make his home life better. After his wife left, Brian no longer had any purpose in his life except avenge his son. He began to investigate everything related to his enemy, which finally allowed him to figure out that Gonzalez is the name of his enemy. He also began exercise to increase his strength and ability too. He even buys a car and a gun for support his mission. He also set the due date for the retaliation. Brian truly gave his best on this revenge. It seemed like this is his suicide mission.
Inside.
And after nearly 7 months, finally, all of the aspects required for revenge were achieved. Before he begins his mission, Brian observes the Gonzalez gangs from a distance in order to choose his first target. Finally, Brian chose on Carlos, an associate of the Gonzalez gang, as the starting point for his action. He visits Carlos and successfully immobilizing him. He brought Carlos, who was unconscious, to the home of a detective and provided him with some evidence of all the crimes committed by Gonzalez. After that, Brian prepares himself for his big fight. He writes a final letter for his wife and also went on his son's cemetery for his final goodbye. Brian arrived in the neighborhood where the Gonzalez and his gang lived. He starts to take out 2 of the gang members. Brian also cut their fingers and sent them to Gonzalez in order to make him believe that his rival gangs were the ones responsible. Brian took all of these actions to start conflict between the 2 different gangs and make it possible for them to attack one another.
All units, multiple reports of gang war.
Brian's plan finally works. A brawl breaks out between the 2 gangsters. In the middle of the chaos, he just realized that he had been recorded by one of Gonzalez's men. Despite Brian's attempts to take the phone, the video was sent. Gonzalez also recognized Brian and finally understands that Brian set this all up. He immediately contacted his right hand, Ruiz, and asked him to bring Brian's head. It appears that Ruiz doesn't need to try to find him, since Brian came by himself and persuaded everyone to come after him. After a long pursuit, after that, Brian takes a moment to think about his plan to entering Gonzalez headquarters. When he finds that Gonzalez is gathering all of his men in his headquarters, he eventually manages to get inside the building. Brian managed to finish all the gang's members one by one. Finally, Brian reached at the building's top floor. Brian immediately sets up an explosive wire trap to keep anyone from getting inside. Ruiz suddenly appeared and attacked Brian. It turns out that Ruiz is still alive and survived the accident. After a long fight, finally Brian was able to kill Ruiz. Gonzalez's girlfriend also unable to avoid Brian's attack after trying to kill him with machine gun. After that, only final target he had to kill, Brian starts entering Gonzalez's private space. Unfortunately, Gonzalez had managed to put Brian in a terrible position when he aimed a gun directly at his head. But fortunately, in the film's ending, Brian's wife is shown grieving in front of her son's grave and reading the last letter he wrote to her. Okay, I'll finish the story here. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to watch the synopsis of a different film. Bye.